Part two of the prologue. We ended the previous recording on page 25 and we're starting at the top of page 26. They glittered like flames beneath a kettle, supple his boots, his horse in fine condition. He was a prelate fit for exhibition. He was not pale like a tormented soul. He liked a fat swan best and roasted whole. His palfrey was as brown as is a berry. There was a friar, a wanton one, and merry, a limiter, a very festive fellow. In all four orders there was none so mellow, so glib with gallant phrase and well-turned speech. He fixed up many a marriage, giving each of his young women what he could afford her. He was a noble pillar to his order. Highly beloved and intimate was he with county folk within his boundary, and city dames of honour and possessions, for he was qualified to hear confessions, or so he said with more than priestly scope. He had a special licence from the Pope. Sweetly he heard of his penitence and at shrift, with pleasant absolution for a gift. He was an easy man in penance giving, where he could hope to make a decent living. It's a sure sign whenever gifts are given, a poor order that a man's well shriven. And should he give enough he knew in verity, the penitent repented in sincerity. For many a fellow is so hard of heart, he cannot weep for all in his inward smart. Therefore, instead of weeping and of prayer, one should give sliver for a poor friar's care. He kept his stuffed with pins for curls and pocket knives to give to girls. And certainly his voice was gay and sturdy, for he sang well and played the hurdy-gurdy. At Saint-Saëns he was champion of the hour. His neck was whiter than a lily flower. Strong enough to butt a bruiser down, he knew the taverns well in every town, and every innkeeper and barmaid too, better than lepers, beggars, and that crew. For in so eminent a man as he, it was not fitting with the dignity of his position dealing with a scum of wretched lepers. Nothing good can come of commerce with such slum and gutter dwellers, but only with the rich and victual sellers. But anywhere a profit might accrue. A courteous he was and lowly service too. Natural gifts like his were hard to match. He was the finest beggar of his batch, and, for his begging district, paid rent. His brethren did no poaching where he went. For though a widow mightn't have a shoe, so pleasant was his holy how d'ye do. He got his farthing from her just the same. Before he left and his income came, so more than he laid out. And how he romped, just like a puppy. He was ever prompt to arbitrate disputes on settling days, for a small fee, in many helpful ways. Not then appearing as your cloistered scholar, with threadbare habit hardly worth a dollar, but much more like a doctor or a pope, of double worsted, and was the semi-cope upon his shoulders, and the swelling fold about him, like a bell about its mould. When it is casting rounded out his dress, he lisped a little out of wantonness, to make his English sweet upon his tongue. When he had played his harp, or having sung, his eyes would twinkle in his head and bright as any star upon a frosty night. This worthy's name was Hubert, it appeared. There was a merchant with a forking beard and motley dress. High on his horse he sat, upon his head Flemish beaver hat, and on his feet daintily buckled boots. He told of his opinions and pursuits. In solemn tones he harped on his increase of capital. There should be sea police. He thought upon the Harwich Holland ranges. He was expert at dabbling in exchanges. This estimable merchant so had set his wits to work. None knew he was in debt. He was so stately in administration. In loans and bargains and negotiation, he was an excellent fellow all the same. To tell the truth, I do not know his name. An Oxford cleric, still a student though, one who had taken logic long ago, was there. His horse was thinner than a rake, and he was not too fat, I undertake, but had a hollow look, a sober stare, the thread upon his overcoat was bare. He had found no preferment in the church, and was too unworldly to make search for secular employment. By his bed he preferred having 20 books in red and black of Aristotle's philosophy, than costly clothes, fiddle, and psaltery. Though a philosopher, as I have told, he had not found the stone for making gold. Whatever money from his friends he took, he spent on learning or another book, and prayed for them most earnestly, returning thanks to them thus for paying for his learning. His only care was study, and indeed he never spoke a word more than was need. Formal at that, respectful in the extreme, short to the point, and lofty in his theme. A tone more of mortal virtue filled his speech, and gladly would he learn and gladly teach. A sergeant at the law, who paid his calls, wary and wise, for clients at St. Paul's. Was also There also was a noted excellence. Discreet he was, a man of reverence. Or so he seemed, his sayings were so wise, he often had been justice of assize. By letters patent and full commission, his fame and learning, and his high position, had won him many a robe and many a fee. There was no such conveyancer as he. All was fee simple to his strong digestion, not one conveyance could be called in question. Though there was nowhere one so busy as he was less busy than he seemed to be. He knew of every judgment, case and crime ever recorded since King William's time. He could not dictate defences or draft deeds, no one could pinch a comma from his secretes, and he knew every statute off by rote. He wore a homely, party-colored coat, girt with a silken belt of pinstripe stuff. Of his appearance I have said enough. There was a Franklin with him, it appeared, white and as a daisy petal was his beard, a sanguine man, high-colored and benign. He loved a morning sop of cake and wine. He lived for pleasure, and had always done, for his Epicurus's very son. In whose opinion sexual delight was the one true felicity in sight. As noted as St. Julian was for bounty, he made his household free to all the county. His bread, his ale, were finest of the wine fine, and no one had a better stock of wine. His house was never short of baked meat pies, of fish and flesh, and these in such supplies. It positively snowed with meat and drink, and all the dainties that a man could think. According to the seasons of the year, changes of dish were ordered to appear. He kept fat partridges in coops beyond, many a bream and pike were in his pond. Woe to the cook unless the sauce was hot and sharp, or if he wasn't on the spot. And in his hall a table stood arrayed, and ready all day long, with places laid. As justice at the sessions none stood higher, he often had been member for the shire. A dagger and a little purse of silk hung at his girdle, white as morning milk. As sheriff he checked audit every entry, he was modelled among landed gentry. A haberdasher, a dyer, a carpenter, a weaver, and a carpet maker were among our ranks, all in the livery of one impressive guild fraternity. They were so trim and fresh their gear would pass for new. Their knives were not tricked out with brass, but wrought with purest silver, which vouches a like display on girdles and on pouches. Each seemed a worthy burgess, fit to grace a guild hall with a seat upon the dais. Their wisdom would have justified a plan to make each one of them an alderman. They had the capital and revenue, besides their wives declared it was their due, and if they did not think so, then they ought to be called Madam and Glorious Thought. And so is going to church and being seen, having your mantle carried like a queen. They had a cook with them who stood alone, for boiling chicken with a marrow bone, sharp flavoring powder and a spice for savor. He could distinguish London ale by flavor. And he could roast and seethe and broil and fry, make good thick soup and bake a tasty pie. But what a pity, so it seemed to me, that he should have an ulcer on his knee. As for blancmange, he made it with the best. There was a skipper hailing from far west. He came from Dartmouth, so I understood. He rode a farmer's horse as best he could, in a woolen gown that reached his knee, a dagger on a lanyard falling free, hung from his neck under his arm and down. The summer heat had tanned his color brown, and certainly he was an excellent fellow, many a draught of vintage red and yellow. He'd drawn the Bordeaux while the traitor snored, the nicer rules of conscience he ignored. If, when he fought, the enemy vessels sank, he sent his prisoners home, they walked the plank. As for his skill in reckoning his tides, currents, and many other risks besides, moons, harbors, pilots, he had such dispatch that none from Hull to Carthage was his match. Hardy he was, prudent in undertaking, his beard in many a tempest had its shaking, and he knew all the heavens as they were, from Gotland to Cape Finisterre, and every creek in Brittany and Spain. The barge he owned was called Madeleine. A doctor too emerged as we proceeded. No one alive could talk as well as he did on points of medicine and of surgery, or being grounded in astronomy. He watched his patient closely for the hours when, by his horoscope, he knew the powers of favorable planets, and then ascendant, worked on the images for his dependent. The cause of every malady you'd got, he knew, and whether dry, cold, moist, or hot. He knew their seat, their humor and condition. He was a perfect practicing physician. These causes being known for what they were, he gave the man his medicine then and there. All his apothecaries in a tribe were ready with the drugs he would prescribe, and each made money from the other's guile. They had been friendly and goodish while. He was well versed in Aesculapius too, and what Hippocrates and Rufus knew, and Discordes, now dead and gone, Galen and Reyes and Haley and Serpion, Averroes and Avicenna, Constantine, Scotch Bernard, John of Geddesden, and Gilbertine. In his own diet he observed some measure. There were no superfluities for pleasure, only digestives, nutritives, and such. He did not read the Bible very much. In blood-red garments slashed with bluish gray and lined with taffeta he rode his way. Yet he was rather close to expenses, and kept the gold he won pestilences. Gold stimulates the heart, or so we're told. He therefore had a special love of gold. A worthy woman from beside Bath City. Okay, so on the next recording we will conclude this reading. Thank you.